All right, hello again. So this video is just kind of a quick overview of color, a little bit about color, color psychology, color schemes, stuff like that. Not really the technical stuff, but more of the psychology of it, color schemes, design, color design, things like that, as related to web design. This is a huge subject. There's a whole class or two in color that you could take. It's a big deal. It affects how your website or your app is perceived. Reactions to it, all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of horror stories about poor color choices and then things don't work or aren't effective, right? So here's a nice example of a beautiful website with a nice color scheme. Not really, right? So you've probably seen this before. This is purposely bad. This is a purposely poorly designed website. Maybe, like I've said, you've seen it before. But so this color scheme, there really isn't a color scheme. Scheme is kind of the plan, right? What is the plan for the color scheme for this site? There isn't one. Super bright colors, sort of contrasting colors, no plan to it. Hurts the eyes, painful to take a shower after I look at it, that kind of stuff. So you have to watch out for the way you choose color and how many colors you choose and if they go together and that kind of thing. When you're designing, you can't talk to a client and say, this website is blank, pink or blue or whatever, because I like pink or blue. No, that doesn't work, right? There has to be some reason to use the color. So this is this is a book. Maybe you're still using this book, Principles of Beautiful Web Design, 3rd edition, but it's got a really good chapter on color. It talks about the psychology of color. So different colors obviously have different psychologies to them as far as the reaction that you're going to get. I'll make this a little bigger so you guys can see it. The reaction you're going to get from different colors. So you probably have seen some of this stuff before maybe, but red is an exciting color, increases metabolism, supposedly makes people hungry. That's why you might see it in fast food restaurants, that kind of thing. There's a lot of physiological reactions to color, and you have to kind of take that into account. There's stories about new magazines with red covers selling double just because the cover has got a lot of red on it. So it can be an effective color to draw attention. Orange, sort of like an energetic color like red, but not quite so strong. Promotes happiness, sunshine, enthusiasm, makes people feel maybe happy, kind of warm. You think of warm colors, right? If you see a photograph that's warm, people seem happy. If it's cool or blue, it may seem a little bit less happy, a little down, right? So orange is a useful color. It has all these have positive and negative connotations as well. Orange is kind of associated with sales, like orange tags on food in grocery stores often means that it's for sale, it's old bread, that kind of thing. So you have to watch out for everything. And there's also cultural connotations for colors as well. Yellow is an active color, highly energetic, easy to see or bright, right? So yeah, I'm just gonna kind of skim through these a little bit. Green is commonly associated with nature. It's soothing, can have ideas or connotations of freshness and hope, easy on the eye to see. It's actually the easiest color. I think one of the easiest. Gray and green are very easy for eyes to see. Now this leaves out a little bit about some people are colorblind, right? More men than women, I believe. But color blindness is something you need to think about too, which we will look at in a second, I think. So blue is a commonly used color, especially for web design and app design. It has kind of a corporate feel to it. It's pleasant, often cited as a universally loved color, symbolizes openness, intelligence, faith, lots of positive things. You see a lot of companies, a lot of logos use blue. A lot of company websites, a lot of company branding uses blue, Facebook, things like that, right? But it can also be a symbol of bad luck or trouble. It has a combination. It's associated with blues music, Picasso's Blue Period. All kinds of things can be associated with certain colors. The sky, the sea, right? Things like that. But it can be a calming color as well. So I mentioned about lots of companies use blue, right? IBM, Dell, HP, Microsoft, sense of stability and clarity of purpose. So purple is not as popular a color. It has connotations of royalty and wealth and extravagance and things like that. one of the least used colors in web design. Talks about a book, Web Designer's Idea Book, which I think I've seen, where he almost had to get rid of. The book is broken down into designs by color in one area, and almost had to get rid of the purple section because there's not used a whole lot. So watch out for purple, but if you want to make it stand out, maybe think about purple. White, Western culture, white's considered to be the color of perfection, light, and purity, but in Chinese culture, it could be associated with death and mourning. So that's another example of how colors have connotations based on the culture that they're displayed in. So you might have a different color scheme for a different audience. You definitely might. So if your target audience is in the U.S., then it might have a different color scheme than if it's in China per se. So think about that. Keep that in mind as well. Black has positive connotations like power, elegance, and strength, and like a black tie dinner or a black car. Movado watch. You've probably heard of a Movado watch. It's an all black face. Very elegant, right? But it can also have things like death and evil and things like that associated with it. So again, positives and negatives from everything. Two kind of color categories. I think I mentioned already color temperature. You got warm colors and cool colors. Warm colors would be like oranges and yellows and reds. They tend to be happy and come forward a little bit, especially when paired with cool colors. Cool colors would be things like blue, purple, green. They tend to recede a little bit. So think about that. There's also chromatic value, which means tints and shades, adding them black and white to colors. And we'll see that in a second, how you can do that and make things lighter or darker, heavier or lighter, that kind of thing. There's a chromatic value right there. So the rest of this chapter also talks about color schemes, which I'm going to show you in a different way. So what's a color scheme? A color scheme is putting colors together in combinations that work for the design. So here's an example that I did a couple of years ago, but it still kind of works. So this is Bank of America's. It probably doesn't look like this anymore, but this is Bank of America's website. And of course, it uses the Bank of America colors, which are red, white, and blue, like America, right? But think about if you change the color scheme to this, right? How does that change the perception of that brand? Does this is more like earth tones, right? Greens and oranges and things like that. Makes it feel maybe a little less serious. Would you trust Bank of America with your money as much as if it's this color? I don't really trust Bank of America anyway. Well, yeah, I probably shouldn't say that, but you might not trust them anyway with your money. But it definitely has a different feel to it, right? Here's another example. This is Facebook, lots of blue, right? Kind of a minimal color scheme. There's definitely blue and then white and then a lot of white space. But here, if we changed it to, again, kind of a sort of a ochre color or kind of a goldish brown, how that feels different and has a different feel to it. I think it kind of feels a little more friendly if you ask me, but yeah. Here's another example. This is kind of an extreme example. This is Old Navy's website from a few years ago. Now I think it's more monochromatic, kind of gray and yeah, lots of minimal color or not as much color. But Old Navy is part of a group of companies, Banana Republic and Gap and Athleta and things like that, right? So Old Navy was the lower end sort of bargain brand. And their color scheme for that was very bright and kind of happy and almost cartoonish colors, bright and saturated stuff. But what if you took those colors out? Definitely a different feel, right? Now it feels more like maybe Banana Republic or Gap, where you're going for more of an elegant look, even though there's still color in here. And the colors the images don't really work for that kind of elegant brand thing, right? Because it's a bunch of dirty kids. But yeah, so you can definitely change the perception of a brand by changing this color scheme, right? You also want to make sure that if you're doing a website or an app or whatever, you want to make sure that you are using the brand's colors. So obviously you wouldn't do a website for UPS and say, I'm going to make it all blue, right? UPS is not blue. It has a specific shade of brown. You don't even want to use a different shade of brown. You want to make sure that you use the branding, existing branding, if it exists, in your color schemes and things. So let's take a quick look at how you get color schemes or what the color schemes are. So this is a website for an app that does color schemes, but it has a nice description of some of the color schemes as well. So we can kind of look at that real quick before we generate a couple. So this is monochromatic. Monochromatic means, so this is a color wheel if you've never seen this before. This is the hue. Hue is the pure version of the color as we go around this wheel. It's kind of like the visual spectrum, right? So monochromatic's color scheme, everything is the same color. Maybe it has tints and shades of the same color, but it is the same based on the same hue or same pure color. Always looks balanced, appealing, might be a little bit, maybe let's say boring or not lack energy because it's not a lot of variation in the color. So that's called a monochromatic. Mono means one. That's a way that you can remember that. One color only. An analogous color scheme means you're looking at colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So here's a color wheel, right? And there's a little spectrum of colors that are used there. Similar to a monochromatic color scheme, but it does have some more variations so you can get a little bit nicer contrast and things like that, color contrast, changes in color, right? Very popular probably in web design, analogous color schemes. Not super contrasty, not a ton of energy, but easy on the eyes. Complementary color scheme means you've picked colors that are on opposite sides of the color wheel. That's also pretty popular in design. And what that does is it makes the colors pop, right? If they're on the opposite side of the color wheel, that's a lot of color contrast. The farther away they are from each other, the more color contrast there is. So it's stronger contrast, draws a lot of attention. You have to be careful with it. It can actually be hard to look at. You might get an effect called simultaneous contrast where colors seem to even vibrate if they're next to each other. And it can be hard to look at, actually. It's kind of a clashing color scheme. So just be careful with that, but also used a lot on the web. You may hear a complementary color. You may have an overall color scheme that's more analogous or monochromatic, but then you have a complementary color that's used as an accent. Maybe it's for the call to action button or something like that. You'll see that sometimes. Split complementary means you're taking a color and then you're going to the complementary and then using analogous colors from the complementary color. So again, it kind of takes the edge off of a complementary color scheme a little bit, but it still has a lot of color contrast that will make it kind of pop. Tetradic means you've got three colors, like a triad, right? Which means three. So you've got three colors sort of equally spread around the color wheel. Not sure if that one's used a ton, but a lot of these are just, you do variations on these and you'll see that a lot. And then you got a double complementary or split complementary, actually double complementary or tetradic, where you've got two sets of alternating or complementary colors that are together. A lot of variety of color, hard to balance, but it's gonna have a lot of energy and variety and things like that. So lastly, let's take a look at generating a color scheme. You know, you're thinking like, well, okay, I get it. There's a bunch of color schemes. How do I come up with a color scheme for my website or app? So there's a bunch of tools, thankfully, for that. This one's called, and I hadn't seen this one until recently, it's called Coolors. Lots of coolers, right? So let me refresh this guy because I was playing with it earlier, and maybe I'll come back to it. This one's called ColorMine. Supposedly uses AI to generate color schemes, which means, it's going to take over the world and we'll all be working for the machines. I don't know if it means that, but what happens is you can click generate and it kind of comes up with a color scheme pretty much on its own. You can click on any of these and vary it and change the colors a little bit. And the cool part is once you do that, let's see if I just pick some wild colors so you can see it in action here. Once I do that, the rest of this page, color scheme changes. The background colors change, the accent colors change. Talks about, which color to use for what. That's pretty bright, right? I picked that super big red. Maybe I change that to a more subdued, sort of darker red, and you can see the background image change color. The accent color is now this dark red that's up here. So it's pretty cool, and it kind of gives you, shows you what a page would look like designed with that color scheme. Both light on dark there or dark on light. So I kind of like this one. It's kind of nice to play with. And it's nice that it gives you sort of a modern looking website designed with that color scheme to play with. So again, you kind of just pick a color. You can also click generate and it'll do, you can lock any of these colors as well. So let's say I lock that one and that one and I click generate and it'll just run through different colors that are not locked. And then you see what that looks like. Oh, look, we got a pretty blue website. Pretty typical looking, very typical looking actually. So that's called ColorMine. This one's called Peloton or Peloton, not Peloton like the bike, but Peloton, I think. Similar thing, right? You can pick the color schemes here. It's hard to see actually. Not a good color contrast on the website, but it does do some pretty cool things as far as generating color schemes. You can see the color scheme over here. I can drag this in and out to add tints and shades. That's an analogous color scheme or adjacent colors. This is triad. You can drag out here to change it. So that's pretty cool. You can also click on examples and it will pop up a web page based on that color scheme. And it seems to be a little slow today, so I'm not gonna wait for it. Yeah, spinning. So that's not really working quite right, but it does do that usually. Let me skip back to Coolors. Okay, Coolors is working. Yeah, so Coolors is kind of, you just hit the space bar and it'll come up with this random color scheme, and then you can lock colors again and then hit the space bar and it'll make variations on that. So this is kind of complementary here, right? We've got a cool blue and a warm orange. That's a complementary color scheme. And then if I hit the space bar, it'll generate some color schemes based on that. So that's kind of cool. That's a cool way to play with it. One thing that this website does is it will, you can check different types of color blindness. So I'm gonna go to deuteraniopia, or some of these other color schemes. So some types of color blindness shift colors, some types of color blindness remove colors. So why do we care? Well, there are a lot of colorblind people, believe it or not. And then what you want to do is make sure that your design has enough contrast so that people can see things, right? If I look at this normally, those look pretty much like different colors, right? I'm not going to have a problem seeing this color next to that color, or even this color text maybe on that. That might be a little bit low contrast, but if I go to that, now I've got, I would not want to use those two colors, or I had to be able to see something on top of this color on top of that one. So you do need to check that as part of accessibility as well. To make your website accessible to everybody, you have to think about, well, what if somebody can't see the colors? They need to see brightness contrast. So I may have to take this color here and I can click on alternate shades. It's kind of cool here. Maybe I'm going to go a lot lighter with that one. Now it's a lot lighter. And now if I go back to color blindness, now there's better contrast. So contrast means the ratio of dark to light. So this person could use this, right? As opposed to before, they probably couldn't. So that's a pretty cool one. Last one here, I'm skipping down here to Adobe. It's called Adobe Color. You can use this. The cool thing about this one is there's lots of existing color schemes in here. There's a big community to it. You can save your color schemes. If you're an Adobe Creative Cloud member, you can save your color schemes. You can import them where you are. You can also see trends. I think this tool is probably used a lot. Here's fashion. Oh, those are just images. Huh? Yeah. But anyway, you can save your themes. So here's my themes right there up at the top. And you can save your own themes, and then you can kind of access them anywhere. I guess I saved this one somewhere. Or I don't even know if I'm logged in. I think I am actually. One cool thing that this does, and some of the other tools do it, here you can see you can go to monochromatic and play with that and drag these around. Then you can see the color code down there to copy the color code. Most of these tools, maybe all of them do that. Here's Triad again, complementary, tints and shades if you want to go monochromatic. And then you can kind of drag around to the hue you like, and then you'll see the color scheme here. And you can also play with these sliders to shift colors and things like that. Whoa, that's a big shift. But that's pretty cool. But one thing you can do also is I can go up to here where it says extract an image from an image, and I can click on that. And then I'm going to drag an image to that. And then what it can do is it samples colors from the image. So if I was going to do a website, for, I don't know, a green organization, or maybe even natural food and stuff, you want to use sort of natural colors, right? And then I can take this, it did this color scheme for me, but I can also kind of drag this around, and it just picks up the color. It's pretty simple. It just picks up the color underneath the cursor, and then you have this color scheme based on this image. So I could base this color scheme for a website on this image, especially if I was going to use that image in the header or something like that. So pretty cool stuff like that. And others of these do that as well. Image upload here in ColorMine, for example. So that's not the only tool that does that. Yeah, so I think that is it. So I just wanted to get you guys thinking about color, think about color psychology. There's lots of resources. I probably have links everywhere for you guys about that kind of stuff. But it is a huge part of design, obviously, is color. So, but I hope that helps, and I'll talk to you again later.